Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Thought Adventure podcast. And today we have a special episode where we are going to be interviewing Justin, formerly known as the Empathetic Atheist. He's had his own YouTube channel. He has embraced Islam, alhamdulillah, and now has taken on the name Khalilullah. So this is a little bit different. We usually bring up a specific topic, as you guys know, sort of break it down, mostly philosophical arguments and such. And then we open it to the audience for people to call in. But like I said, this is a special occasion where we will be interviewing Justin, who is a new convert, and sort of going over his journey, a little bit of his background, explaining who he is. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him because he's been on the show a couple times before where he's called in to discuss other topics. And so people should be generally familiar with Justin. So we're going to first kind of go through his background and then talk about his journey to Islam. But before we get started, I just want to say salam to the panelists. So how you guys doing?
Wa alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah.
Alaikum salam. Very good.
Yeah. So, I think got this going. We got 35 people watching already. MashaAllah. Hope everybody is having a good Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak to everybody. And, with that being said, we've got a list of questions here that we're going to be going through with Justin. But before we get to that, actually, I want to give a bit of a backstory before we go to the first question with Justin. So Justin came out on Facebook to explain to people that he was Muslim about a week or so ago. And there's been a variety of different reactions from the atheist community. Some people were very upset about it, making videos about it, public statements about Justin's conversion, and we're very sort of defensive and aggressive towards him. He's received threats and, numerous things that are really unfortunate. And then there's been others who have been somewhat supportive of Justin and, not really attacking him as much. So there's been a diverse reaction within the atheist community, and we're going to go into a bit more detail about that as the stream goes along, inshallah. But do you guys have anything else to add before we start the formal questions here?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's going to be quite so formal. So, don't worry, Khalil. It's not going to be. We're not going to grill you, inshallah.
I'm ready either way.
But no, alhamdulillah, I think it's just just so that Khalil has the opportunity to give his side of the story. Obviously, Khalil can explain properly his side, but he didn't actually officially come out and say he was Muslim. He just simply changed his name. And so people got so shocked and upset by it because I don't think Khalil was going to actually come out and just sort of announce it. He was just going to carry on pretty much as normal, but he was pretty much forced into the position where he had to come on this show and had to sort of explain his own views, isn't it? So I think that's the reason why we're doing this. I think ordinarily we would have probably said to Khalil, best to take some time out, understand, learn more about the deen, be comfortable with it, especially because it's Ramadan as well. Everybody's fasting, including Khalil. How's your fast, by the way, Khalil?
It's getting easier. The first day was kind of hard. I wasted an entire Mountain Dew by opening up the lid. I think you guys in the video calls have seen me. I just sniffed the Mountain Dew and then closed the lid. And eventually I opened it so many times that it went flat and it wasn't even worth drinking once I broke my fast. So I just tossed that out. But it's getting easier and easier. I tried. I went to the halal market to pick up some meat. And I tried the dates. How
did you find the dates?
I don't like them. I don't like dates at all.
Is it like raisins?
I even got the Majul ones.
Is it? Right. Is it acquired taste, I think?
It's a raisin taste, and I can't stand raisins.
So then you agreed with me then, Khalil.
Yeah, it's like raisins.
All right. At least my description was accurate. I didn't bait you into it. I told you it was like a big raisin, dude.
No. But I gotta say that definitely the meat that I got from the halal market looks a lot fresher than what the just the ground beef
Supermarket
that you
one.
like get at the supermarket. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I don't know, Jay. Should we start off and maybe ask a few questions? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sure.
so Khalil, I just for the audience, just to explain really your background because you were born into a Christian family. So I don't know if you want to just sort of explain a bit further in terms of that particular upbringing in Christianity.
Sure. So I was actually born not into Christianity but to Catholicism.
Okay.
So I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic school for 7 years. And it was called St. Bartholomew Consolidated School. We went to church 3 times a week, two during the week, during school, and then once on Sunday. I went through confession, confirmation, baptism, the whole works, the anointment, everything. Took Jesus as my Lord and Savior, which at the time I didn't really understand what even that meant. I have to, be honest. Most of the time when I went to church, I was more worried about what donuts were going to be served after mass. So I grew up, in the Catholic school, and then I was told in second grade by one of my teachers, my science teacher. She said that if I didn't turn my homework in, that I was going to be hung by my tongue over fire and brimstone. And as a second grader, that scared the living daylights out of me. So I kind of started inching away little by little. Once I got to seventh grade, I finally told my mom. I said I'd kind of like to go to the public school where all my friends in the neighborhood go. I don't really like this whole Catholic thing, and so she moved me to my local public school. And then I started to get in touch with some friends that were Christians, and went to a church called John Wesley that's down the street from me. So I went there, found a good community, good support group, joined the youth group, joined the youth or the church band, played guitar for them for a while, and it was really getting into it. And I was told by the people around me that that I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and that I was, a good speaker. Like I'm an extrovert, so I don't have a problem speaking with people, or I don't have a stage fright or shyness or anything like that. So basically, I was told you need to be, you should become a preacher. Like you're good at this. So I dove into the Bible to try and figure out, the full understanding and maybe get a step ahead from some of the other people that would be in seminary with me. And when I did that, I saw a whole bunch of horrible things that's not told at the pulpit. And it was like an emotional thing. And I kind of stepped away I did a 180 and walked the other way for moral and emotional reasons, which I don't believe that that's the best way to step away. But after I stepped away and started looking into more atheism and atheistic views, I started to try and learn more logic and reasoning. So I learned logic and reasoning, and I thanked atheism for that. Now, up until recently, I've thanked atheism for that, but then I met a group of Muslim brothers, yourselves, and a couple of other guys that showed me that I can still use that.
Alhamdulillah. We'll get on to more of those details, inshallah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Abdul Rahman's has been a bit quiet. Or is it Jake?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So I guess we can ask you about like your first experience with Muslims. Was it here in these groups, like where you talking to us about philosophy and the existence of God and stuff, or you have past experiences with Muslims?
Yes, I have past experiences, and I think you guys might ask about this here in later in this show. But my first experience one-on-one with Muslims, like face to face, was in my time in Kandahar, Afghanistan, where I was deployed.
Yeah, and just what was that experience like?
Some of the most peaceful people I've ever met in my entire life.
Wow.
It's fantastic. Their food, the curry, I'm not a fan of, but they definitely know what hospitality is. They definitely know They're wise, like respectful, like not what you hear or see when you turn on, the news.
Hmm. Now, and that was when you were in the army, right? So why did you actually join the army?
Why did I join the army? So there was a couple reasons. I was always interested in one becoming a Marine, um, and I wanted to do that. Uh, the wife at the time said, "I know what that's all about. You're not doing that. You could try the army." And then when we were sitting there thinking about it, we ended up finding out that we were pregnant, and I was like, "Oh, well, we're not married yet. The military gives free benefits for for having children. So one, I wanted to join anyways, and this is kind of like I felt like this was a good opportunity to push for for joining the army by saying, hey, we can have benefits, and it's not going to cost us 20-30 grand to have this child. So those were a couple reasons why I went ahead and made the push. I had hair that was about 3 times as long as Abdul, and I chopped it off and left for the army.
Cool. So what was? I know you said you mentioned you met Muslims out there, Afghans. But what was your perception of Muslims before you went there? Obviously, you must have been in combat situations or dangerous situations when you were there. So
Yeah.
did you have like a negative perception of Muslims before you went
Um.
out there? Did it change when you went out there?
So I am right now saying that they're some of the most peaceful people that I've ever met because I knew that was the truth. While I was out there, I was quite racist. In my past, I was I've been very very racist, and said some horrible things to people that I now fully regret. But I embrace the memories to know where I've came from, and to know how I've changed. So when I was out there, I was suppressing the thought that these people were peaceful. Uh, Muslims were just a bunch of goat herding idiots and things like that. And that was just a mentality that I had, when I held these very racist views. So it's changed a lot since then. So I mean that's kind of, if that answers the question.
Right. So you basically you're saying that you came from a racist sort of perception
Yeah.
against blacks as well, or just
Anybody that wasn't white.
right? Okay then. Okay. How did you square that with your Christian faith? Because obviously you were going to Catholic school, you were potentially at one time training to be a Christian preacher as well.
Yeah, well, so what I did is I didn't mix the two. So when I was in church, I was, the good. I'm gonna be good for God, and I'm gonna be, this really nice person. And then when I got out and I, pulled out on the street and I pulled up to the stoplight, and there's uh, African American next to me in the lane next to me, then I was like, oh, look at this idiot over here, and then just start talking all kinds of crap just because he had a different skin color. So basically, I just kept the two apart. When I was inside of the church doors, I felt like I was pure and I was clean and I was good to go. And then once I got out of church, I just did whatever I wanted to.
Justin, would you say that you were kind of like a white supremacist almost?
You could say that, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I had contemplated in my younger days wanting to get like a swastika tattoo. I saw American History X, and the dude had a swastika across his heart, and I was like, I'm gonna do that one day.
Yeah, but just Khalil, that film's meant to be anti-racism.
I know, but I cherry picked it. Abdul, we can't
Abdul, I
hear you
think
if you're talking.
yeah, you might be muted, Abdul.
No, I can't
No,
hear
we
you.
can't hear you, bro.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay,
then he's
okay.
gonna pop in and pop out.
Okay.
So yeah, so while Abdul's about to come back, then just one other question, then basically. So when you were out there, how was the perception of other American soldiers regards to the Muslims and Afghanis there? Were they like, similar to yourself, or were they different? Or
Some of them were similar. I actually did have somebody who was from Pakistan that was there with me. And I gotta say that he was kind of Americanized. Try and talk, Abdul. No.
Can't hear you, bro. You might want to. Is there a mute button on your headset? Try to unmute from your headset or no? But anyway, continue.
go
Khalil.
Karen, Khalil. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was similar. I don't think that they were to the extent that I was. I kind of tried to keep my mouth shut about it because, if we get too disrespectful, then we could get in trouble by our command. But I do believe a lot of the command was basically the same way. The higher ups were the same, same thought process as I had.
Hello.
Hey,
Yeah,
there we
we
go.
can hear you
Okay.
now.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, I'm not sure how far you guys went, but I mean, did you transition from like your Christian faith to atheism while in the army?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sharif, you were just asking about that, right?
Okay.
No, I was. Well, I've not asked that particular question, but that's a good question to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I basically already had almost both feet out the door when I joined the army. So because I was going to leave to be a preacher before I left for the army. And that's when I read, the story about, the two female bears that came out of the woods and mauled 42 children to death. And I'm just like, I've never heard this from the pulpit. Many other stories kind of made me walk the opposite way away from the Bible. So I was losing my faith more and more. The more I looked into it, the more I would, be like, this doesn't make any sense. And that's kind of when I was joining the army was like, I wasn't asking, I wasn't praying, I wasn't asking God for help. I think I still believed in something, but it was something that wasn't important.
I mean that's an interesting because when you're losing your faith in Christianity, right, or any religion, I'm wondering like, do you just default to atheism, or is there still some aspects of belief in a deity, and then you have to get rid of that gradually as well?
Yeah, I think there is a gradual change. How quick you are going through that change may be very different from how the community perceives that change. So both when I was leaving Christianity into atheism, and recently when I was leaving atheism into Islam, a lot of people seem to think it was like this overnight thing. Like it just happened overnight, and that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
Right. So, would you consider yourself, when you were an atheist, a soft or hard atheist at the time?
So I started off as a soft atheist, which means I considered myself, I labeled myself an agnostic atheist, which means that I don't know if a God exists or not. Therefore, I don't believe that a God exists or not. As I dove further into it, having these conversations with you guys, I was able to, you guys actually strengthened my ability to become a hard atheist towards any God claims that are logically contradictory. But the problem is that this God, Allah, I just couldn't seem to knock down. It was one of those dominoes that was just always there. And I was able to knock down polytheism and Christianity and all this other stuff that we talked about. But it seemed like atheism, was there, but it was wobbling back and forth the more we talked about consciousness. And when Jake would get on the call and grill me about rationality and stuff like that, like the dominoes started moving back and forth. But I was able to become a hard atheist and know logically that these other God beliefs could not exist. But I was never that way. I was always agnostic towards Islam because I couldn't find any logical contradictions.
When just before we go on to the Islamic point, bit, when you made the transition, when did you start the Empathetic Atheist? The channel, the YouTube channel.
I think I started it April of last year.
So April 2020.
So just about a year ago, I started the channel.
Right.
Sorry, and how far off was this from you deconverting?
So I probably would say I was totally deconverted in 2010.
Okay,
So
so
about
it's
10
been a
years.
while. About 10 years, yeah. And so what was like the objective of like starting this channel? Like overall?
The objective of the channel was to essentially have people on that I was able to sit down with and talk about what they believe, why they believe it, and to show the community that we could have conversations without getting nasty or violent or calling each other names, ad hominem attacks or personal insults. Because I was just online and I started joining these Facebook groups, and it was just a bunch of yelling back and forth and name calling between both atheist and theist alike. And, I had, left my white supremacy, my racist views, and I became a humanist. And I just I don't like this. Like, I kept seeing atheists saying, well, they're just, delusional. Anybody that believes in a God is just delusional and whatnot. I was like, did I literally, when I left Christianity, did I just walk out of a delusion? Like, did I walk out of a mental illness? I don't think that's, that science would support that. That I just decided one day that I didn't want to have a mental illness and that I no longer had it. So that's kind of what the transition was like.
So in essence, you wanted to set up a YouTube channel that wasn't your typical atheist ranting.
Exactly. No, I did not want it to be what we would call in the debate community or whatnot an echo chamber. That's the last thing that I want is an echo chamber. I want that opposing view. I want to learn what the arguments are against my position and truly be open-minded to looking into those claims and figuring out why they are convinced.
Right.
I don't automatically say if they disagree with me that they're just, ignorant or stupid or whatnot. I really want to understand why they believe something different than I do, because I may be the one that's wrong.
Right.
I mean, but before we transition to the Islam part, sorry. I mean, I think there's an interesting question. What as a theist or as a Christian, how much interaction did you have with atheists, and what did you think of them? Like,
as a Christian, I didn't have
as
any.
a Christian any. So okay, all right.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Now, Justin, you mentioned these Facebook groups and these Facebook calls. You also mentioned echo chamber and that you don't really like echo chambers. You never did. Now, in these Facebook groups that you were a part of, that some of us were also a part of, and while we were talking to you, was this sort of these Facebook group calls and chats, were they just an echo chamber? And what were these calls all about?
The calls that we were in together?
Yeah.
Oh boy, no. I wouldn't be a part of them if they were. So these calls were literally an everyday thing for, I would say, probably for most of you, the last 8 months that I've been talking to you guys. And these calls literally, and I've been doing these calls for longer than 8 months. I'm just saying I've been talking to you guys for about that long. But no, they were atheist, Christian. We've had Muslims. We've had Jews on there. We've had all kinds of different beliefs, faith, walks of life, philosophical positions that differ, all kinds of things with so many different things to talk about. The last thing you could call it would be an echo chamber.
Right.
So because I think the reason why that's an important question to ask, Khalil, is because one of the accusations that have been sort of leveled against yourself by some, not all, some, within the atheist community is that you've just been surrounding yourself by Muslims for the last 8-9 months to a year, and all you've been hearing is Islam and Allah, and so you've not heard any challenges to the arguments.
Yeah. That's what's been claimed. But no, I've heard many different people, many different atheists, as in myself, coming on to battle you guys on these philosophical arguments and having these discussions. And then what I do is I take notes, and that night I go home and I start looking up all my favorite atheists and whatnot, and trying to figure out what the counter argument is, just so I can come back to you guys the next day and be like, "Ha, you're wrong. I got you." And unfortunately, that never happened. I mean, I thought a few times. I was like, "Hey guys, all right. So what about this?" And like within like 3 minutes, it was like, "Oh, so that's solved. It's not a problem. That's not what you guys believe. This was just bad information that I received on my part, or that this is just, a misunderstanding of the argument itself. I'm too much, looking at empiricism, and there was always a problem on my end rather than on your end. And even when other atheists would enter the room and try and debate with you guys, it seemed like you guys were just calmly always holding the upper hand. Like it's almost like you see a guy playing like Eddie Van Halen playing the guitar, and he looks like he's about to fall asleep, but he's playing something so intricate that like somebody else would be just freaking out about it. You guys are just like, all right, yeah. You just go about your day, go about your business, just showing everybody else that that what you believe is consistent.
But during this period of time, sorry, really quick, during this period of time, were you like engaging with other atheists? Like, because obviously on your show, were you bringing on atheists? Were you raising these questions to them? What we were raising? Because I think you had Matt Dillahunty on, Aaron Ra.
Yeah. Seth Andrews, Matt Dillahunty. I had Graham Oppie on. I've been trying to get as many different views from the atheist community as I can to see maybe somebody could help me out, because I know that I'm not the smartest person. I just recently started diving in within the last year, started diving into philosophy. So I know I'm not the smartest person. I know I'm not even close to as well versed in philosophy. So I'm like, well, maybe I might starting to be convinced by my Muslim friends, because I'm just a gullible idiot. But what I did was I looked up those academics and those professionals in the field, experts in their field, and I was seeing that they were having the same problem as me, is that they couldn't tear down Islam.
What was your thoughts? Yeah, so what was your thoughts when you had Graham Oppie on? Because this is like a really big atheist philosopher.
It was definitely a humbling experience, because you get all these atheists on that are like, yeah, God doesn't exist, and this is why, and this is a great argument, and that's a horrible argument. And then you get Graham Oppie on, and he's like, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a causal principle, that there's a necessary existence or being of some sort. But I mean, I don't really think that there's good arguments for really anything. So, I mean, all we can do is sit here and have these conversations and, figure out which way we want to. I'm like, the honesty is off the charts here. Like, he was totally different from the Matt Dillahunty or the Aaron Ra that you see on YouTube that everybody absolutely loves. Like, no disrespect against them. I mean, they helped me out, when I became an atheist. But once I started looking more into the academic field, once we started diving into these Oxford handbooks, and you guys started referencing, Jake Love's Rutledge Companions, after I started looking more at the academic side of things, I started to see that these arguments, against faith, because it's gullibility and all these other things, are just kind of like child's play.
Yeah, I mean, even on the calls, I mean, it's not just the atheist academics. I think we've had some very intelligent atheists on these calls. And the first person that comes to mind for me is one of my friends, Brian. Shout out to Brian, because I think he's one of the most intelligent atheists I've personally ever met, like as a friend. And we've had some very good discussions with Brian and other very intelligent atheists on these groups. And I think, like, at the very least, what it showed, even to the atheist, even for a reasonable atheist, that at least we can tell a consistent story. At least we have rational grounds for our belief, as opposed to the common internet atheist cliche that theism is completely irrational and has no ground to stand on. So I mean, I think that's completely nonsensical. Even generally, philosophers who are well versed in these fields acknowledge that there is evidence for theism. Maybe they don't agree with it, like you mentioned someone like Graham Oppy. So yeah, I think the calls were very important, as well as your shows with some of these philosophers. But on that note, did you notice any kind of difference between like the Muslim approach to argumentation, and Christian approach to argumentation, or other theist approaches to argumentation? Maybe not on the academic level. I mean, from your personal experience with Christians and other people of other faiths.
So yeah, it was boiling hot versus ice cold. Totally different spectrums, totally different sides of the spectrum. With a Christian approach, what I've experienced, and this is coming as from an atheist standpoint. With Christians, it went straight to talking about the Bible, quoting Bible verses, saying that you need to have faith and accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and then you're good to go. Some of them said, yeah, after you do that, you get baptized, and things like that. I have to say, for 7 out of the 8 months that I spoke to you guys, 7 out of those 8 months, you didn't even mention the name Allah. Not even once. Like, if I had questions about it, yeah, but the argumentation that convinced me had nothing to do with the specific religion itself. You guys weren't telling me to have faith in Islam. You guys were having philosophical conversations because we both valued logic and reason. And since we both valued that, we could go into a conversation valuing the same thing and then discuss what our differences might be, or our misunderstandings. So I think that is a much better approach than to just put a book in front of me and say, hey, believe this.
Yeah, just so that the audience doesn't freak out when you said we didn't mention Allah. It's because obviously when you talk to atheists, a lot of them have this impression that when you talk about God, you're talking about some sky daddy.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
the impression that I had. So like I said, 7 out of the 8 months, you guys didn't really use the Quran to argue for the existence of a God. We were going through the baby steps with the philosophical discussions to get me to general theism. And then once we got there, that's when we started talking about the proofs for Islam.
Yeah. But you were also in those conversations where Christians were attacking the Quran.
Yep.
Attacking certain verses and certain rulings and things
I
like
heard
that.
2 different arguments. One of those is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a pedophile. And 2, that he rode around on a magic flying donkey.
Yeah.
Those were the 2 arguments against Islam, while Jake's over here knocking people over the head with a sledgehammer that says Trinity on it. And I'm sitting here like, okay, so I can see how he's logically showing this to be impossible. And you're coming at me with something that this guy was a pedophile based on the social norms that you know today. Yeah, that's not really on par. Those 2 objections are not quite right next to each other when it comes on the scale of reason and logic.
Yeah. We got Brother Yusuf here. Yusuf Ponders. He's graced us with his presence. So, what's going on, man? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. How we doing?
Alhamdulillah.
So, apologies if I keep yawning, by the way. I was in bed late and then I had to get up early because I had a live stream this morning and I've gone to get my little munchkin. So she's playing a game next to me while I'm on. But yeah, how you doing, Khalil?
I'm good. How are you, brother?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, not bad. So I've got a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So what made you consider that Muslims may have an argument?
So like I said, the first 7 months we started talking about just philosophical arguments. Some of these arguments, as an atheist, I thought these were just a joke because I stuck to more of an empiricist route. And when we started to get into these, I started seeing the problems with my view because I had to hold different standards of evidence for different claims. So without us talking about, does God exist? What God is it? you guys started off by saying, well, what do you think about the universe? Do you think it's eternal? Do you think it's finite? Like, what are your views on that? And I was coming at it from a very empirical route, saying, I don't know. We can go back to Planck time, but anything before that, we don't know. So the universe could be eternal. And then we started talking about, the infinite amount of causes and effects that would precede this moment right now, and how if there was an infinite regression, that we would never get to this moment right now. We would just go through that argument. And then once I realized that logically, using induction and using logic and reason, it's reasonable to believe that the universe began to exist and that there's a cause for that beginning of existence. So now it furthers the question, so what caused it to exist? And this is where a lot of atheists jump to, but that doesn't prove God. No, we agree. No, it doesn't prove God. It's not an argument for the existence of God. It's an argument for the existence that things that begin to exist, like the universe, have a cause for its existence, and that's where it ends. Then we can move to the next point. What was that thing? I don't want to say person, or I don't want to say who, but what was it that caused that universe to exist? Could it be another universe? Well, that's fine. Now we're looking into a multiverse theory, but now you have an infinite regression of multiverses. So now there has to be, at the very beginning of that, something that's fundamental, something that's self-sufficient, something that's necessary. Well, it's a necessary existence. Could it be just reality? I mean, I don't know. Listening to Tom Jump, reality is reality. So, once you get to that point, then you're like, okay, so it has to be something that is self-sufficient, something that's necessary. Does it have a will? That's going to be the next thing. How did this universe come into existence? And this, all these things are not things that we just did one day and then the next day, the next argument. I'm saying like the Kalam itself was what, 3 months, 4 months. And then a couple months on the, contingency argument. And then the argument for a will, that was the really, really hard one. And then once we got past that, I was at general theism. Once you're at general theism and you believe that there is some type of necessary causal principle for the universe that had the will to cause this universe to begin to exist, you're at general theism. And now you can start looking at the specific God claims that were given to you or that you have information on. And if you are to value logic and reason, you use the process of elimination to go through these worldviews and these God claims and find out if they are logically contradictory. If they're logically contradictory, you go get with the people that believe in this, that are claim to be well-versed on, within their theology, and you ask them to try and resolve the apparent contradiction. If they cannot solve it over a certain period of time, it can't be solved, I chuck it out the window. I dismiss it because it's logically impossible at this point in time until somebody's able to solve or reconcile the apparent contradiction. At the end of the day, atheism and Islam were the only ones standing.
Right. So, Justin, while you were an atheist, were you an empiricist?
For a certain period of time, until within that talk about the Kalam, you guys showed me that I was contradictory, and I kind of let it go and said, you know what, okay, I'm going to give more credence to philosophy, but still believe that the premises of these arguments need to be backed up by empirical data. And then towards the end, and I think it was one of the last tap shows that you guys had where I was on, was kind of like that point, like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I was shown that I was holding two different standards of evidence for claims, that I thought that these arguments needed to be backed up by empirical evidence to be sufficient and having a good reason to believe. But then you guys brought up the fact of, do I think other minds exist? Well, I don't have any empirical evidence to back that up with. I assume that because it's the best explanation for the reality that I live in. So if I'm able to do that with solipsism, why am I not doing that with other arguments that have been presented to me? Why isn't it not reasonable to believe in this without empirical evidence, but it's okay to believe in this without empirical evidence? That's inconsistent. And that's when atheism had to get checked out the window.
I think there was also another point. Sorry, Jay, I don't know if you were going to ask.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say there was also another point as well, which was the idea of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a big discussion. I think again we had a tap show on that. I don't think you actually came on that show, but we had a discussion afterwards as well, and it seemed to me that when you might as well explain what you don't have to go into the details of the arguments, but I'm just saying what happened in terms of
so the consciousness one was really, really interesting, because during the day we would watch videos and whatnot, like the Chinese room and things of that nature. But basically, I as a materialist, I was an atheist. I was physicalist and materialist. So, I mean, I presuppose the PSR. I believe that everything is determined because it's
the principle of sufficient reason. Just
correct,
for the audience,
yes.
Yeah.
Basically states that everything that happens has an explanation for why it exists, or why an effect is a specific way. So that's where I stood. And then I realized that I wasn't able to use empiricism or materialism to explain qualia, or the experience of doing an action, or the experience itself of, like, for example, I think Donald Hoffman uses like smelling coffee or seeing the redness of an apple. There was no way to differentiate, that experience from real life to a dream. And I was just found to be lacking answers when you could use logic and reason to come to logical conclusions on what this may be.
So Justin, so at this point you chucked materialism out the window, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess, so you were presented arguments for the existence of God, arguments against materialism, naturalism. You explored them. You explored counter arguments. We discussed counter arguments with atheists. You brought on some philosophers on your show. I guess at some point it became reasonable to say that, okay, the idea of God's existence seems to be a reasonable position, seems to be a reasonable answer to these questions. Now, I guess what I'd ask is, at what point did you make that shift, and was it to deism? And if that is the case, how did you make the jump from deism to theism?
So yes, it was a slow process that I kind of kept to myself. I kind of stayed in the background, and was still arguing more for atheism, but more arguing against like points like the Trinity and things that I could still argue against, even as a deist, because it's still, regardless if I was a deist, atheist, Muslim, Hindu, I could still argue against, things like the Trinity, the atonement, the incarnation, things like that. So I was still arguing those points, but in the back of my mind, I was in deep thought. I went to deism, and deism kind of felt like a safe space for me. It was kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like an agnostic position, that there's something out there. There's a causal principle. I don't know what it is. And the more I thought about it, the more of a problem it actually became, just based on like intuition, based on I don't exactly want to say preference, because what I prefer doesn't mean that it's true. Just because
I mean, I guess because we've had discussions about this, and I mean, I think I know what you mean when you're talking about intuition, because once you rationally arrive at the existence of God, right, and once you have that rational ground for believing in the existence of a deity, and you have that rational ground for acknowledging that the deity created everything in existence, the entire contingent world, including yourself, with your rational, truth-bearing faculties and your intuitions, suddenly the intuitions kind of matter, right? I mean, it's not to say that they're infallible, but it's to say that the idea that we have these truth-bearing faculties, we have this conscious self-awareness that's just categorically unlike everything else in the universe, and we have this intuition for this idea of moral accountability, or whatever you want to call it, and drive towards this innate drive towards worshiping God, which even like secular psychologists and philosophers acknowledge. So the idea is, once you rationally arrive at the existence of God, and that starting point is no longer just an intuition that you can't rely on, all of these other pieces need to kind of play a role in forming your worldview. It's not like you're going to chuck them all out of the window. And I think all of a sudden, these intuitions play a role in determining what you're going to say about this being that you've rationally arrived at.
Yeah, and one of the big things, within deism, it leaves the notion for a possible, creator that created the universe and kind of just, went out for a pack of cigarettes and never came back. Kind of just walked away from the situation. And I was like, but, why would they do that? It just didn't make much sense to me. And we had some conversations when it came to just like a deism or just general theist. I don't really see how there's much of a difference between those two claims. It seems like it's just there was some existence, whether it's the universe itself or some creator that created the universe that just doesn't care or doesn't do anything, it just pretty much just created and then stepped away from the project.
Yeah. I mean, just to like touch on these arguments and the basically cumulative case that led you to theism, because you talked about consciousness, rationality, cosmological arguments, morality. There are several different aspects that played a role in this transition that led you to theism. And I guess generally talking about that, because I've seen atheists, some internet atheists, again, I don't want to generalize, that have reacted to your conversion by saying that, you know what, all these arguments have problems, and have you considered this problem and that problem? And what I know you've already touched upon this and how you've already spoken to philosophers, and we've discussed the counter arguments, but I just want to say that every position and every argument has its problems. I mean, there's no argument out there that doesn't have counter argument, that doesn't have problem. So I think it's kind of a moot point if you're going to say that, hey, Justin, how could you convert when these arguments have problems? Well, clearly materialism has its problems, naturalism has its problems. So the idea. That's okay. Inshallah. So the idea, the general idea is that, I mean, as someone like Graham Oppie puts it, it's about worldviews. It's about a cumulative case for, let's say, if you're comparing naturalism versus theism, it's not like there's going to be like one knockdown argument on either side. It's more going to be a cumulative case where you look at the virtues versus the vices of these arguments, and you weigh out the costs versus simplicity and stuff like that. And overall, you kind of take the most reasonable position you find. And as an atheist, I think we discussed this. It's not like as an atheist, you had everything about atheism covered. I mean, it's not like these same internet atheists came to you and like, hey, wait, how can you be an atheist right now? Do you know about something like the problem of intentionality? I don't think it works like that. So it's generally people find certain positions to be reasonable while acknowledging that they don't know everything about those positions, and while acknowledging that obviously there are counter arguments out there. Obviously there are problems with many of these arguments, but as a cumulative case that helps you build your worldview, people don't really look at it like that. People are, at the end of the day, going to make up their decisions not on the basis of the entirety of data, because we're not fallible in our knowledge, but on the basis of what they find reasonable, what they find as reasonable answers to the questions that they ask. And I think that's, for my position, like observing your transition, I think that's basically what you went through.
Another thing to add there is also that you go from I would say, I was ignorant and thinking that science, I was holding science to such a standard that it made absolute claims. And that's, I think, a big misunderstanding within both, the theist and atheist community, is that we think that, science can give us cold, hard, absolute facts, when really science gives us models that comport with reality. And philosophical argumentation is not claiming the absolute truths. It's claiming what's reasonable to believe. And this is how we got there on a logical basis. So I think that if we look at these ways of, these methods or, methodologies, we can see that we can use what's most reasonable to believe, or what comports most with reality, just like we do when it comes to something like solipsism.
Right. So, Justin, when you were going through this process of learning about the different arguments and evidence for God, and you were convinced that there had to be some type of creator, did you take a look at the various other religions, and maybe even in your experience as being a host of an atheist YouTube channel, did that experience sort of show all of the different religious views and perspectives? And while you were going through this process, did you consider and take a look at other religions?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the whole point of the show, was to not just hold a closed-minded position and just have people on so I could argue with them. Like, I really was interested in what other people believed and why they believed it. So yes, I looked into, I had discussions with Hare Krishnas, with Buddhists, with people that claim to be Hindu. I never did get to have a conversation with a Scientologist, but I think we can all just safely say that we'll just go ahead and leave that one aside. But yeah, I had many different conversations with many different people, truly wanting to know what they believed and why, to see if it made sense for me. Because I was the atheist that said, you know what, if there's a God, a loving God, a merciful, forgiving God, and we do have free will and we have been created, well, I want to know about this, and I want to have the first seat on the plane to heaven. Like, I want to be able, I want to be part of that. I don't want to, coming from, with the Christian framework in my head, if I don't accept this, I'm automatically going to hell. So I wanted to know, I wanted to be part of whatever the truth was. And the way to truth is to use logic and reason, and come to let the facts, let the argumentation itself lead you to your destination. And that's why I'm sitting with you guys today.
Alhamdulillah. Did you want to say something, Sharif?
Yeah, so I was going to say, because in the last stream you came on, you mentioned that you would, at that time, I think you sort of light bulb moment, it sort of clicked in terms of the idea that God has a will, and obviously you sort of start to intuitively accept that there needs to be some sort of message, and you were talking about between Islam and Judaism. So what was it that made you think that Judaism is not necessarily one? Was it because of the evidences for Islam, or was it for something else?
Yeah, so when I was using that process of elimination, the last three things that were standing, when I want to go to the three things that was Judaism, Islam, and atheism. And the Judaism just, it was cool for a while until I started looking into like the prophets and like who this book was meant for. Like, was it meant for a specific people? started to look into the Jewish faith, on what they believed and why they believed it, and you know, I do have to say there was some parts of it, like the traditional circumcision process that was just grossed me out, but I didn't want to let that stop me. I didn't want my emotions or what my, you know, personal preference, you know, on circumcision was to determine if I believed in that God or not. I wanted to do it from a rational, logical basis and leave the emotions outside until, you know, until I see fit that it's appropriate to bring the emotions into it.
So I suppose also, because from a Christian background as well, you'd probably have read the Old Testament, and the 5 books which are known as the Torah.
Yeah, so I would say that the Old Testament is probably what I'm most well versed on. Is the Old Testament, going through like Deuteronomy and Numbers, Hebrews, Genesis. That, you know, these Old Testament books is really what I focused on as an atheist, because, you know, and then once I was getting more and more philosophically sound, I was diving into the New Testament. When I'd hear Brother Jake talking about certain things in the New Testament, I was like, wow, there's so much more problems in the New Testament than I thought before. But, you know, I've been spending these amount of years looking into the Old Testament, trying to see what was wrong with that. So that's why I say I'd probably be best versed within the Old Testament than the New Testament.
Okay. So what about why specifically Islam then? What was it? You're saying, okay, Judaism's got the, you know, it's specific for a specific people. It's not really for the whole of mankind. You know, so even if I thought it was true, it's not really for me anyway. But, you know, there's an assumption that revelation from God, guidance from God will be for all of mankind. And obviously that's problematic. There's problematics in certain aspects of the Old Testament. For example, you know, certain passages, we don't know who's authored them. There are certain books, like I think the book of Daniel is considered fictitious, you know, according to a lot of historians. But what then, okay, so we leave that one. So what then leads us to now, to specifically Islam?
So one, we went over the proofs for Islam. After I had eliminated everything and it was atheism and Islam left standing, I was also shown that I don't want to specifically say atheism, but more along the lines of my atheism, what entailed the worldview that I had that atheism was part of, and that was like determinism or hard incompatibilism, materialism. You know, I was a physicalist and a naturalist. Within my worldview on how the only way that I think atheism can exist, I was found that was that my views were incoherent. So all that was standing was Islam, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Islam is true. There's a whole bunch of unknown out there that I, you know, haven't looked at or whatnot. But I mean, how could I believe in something or even investigate it if it's unknown to me? So I look at Islam, and we started going over like the proofs for Islam. We started going over the ring structure of the Quran, and just showing how the claims that were made in the Quran, you know, made so much sense and comported with reality and was reasonable to believe, and just, you know, like for example, what is it? Verse 143, I think it is.
Oh yeah.
Where it says middle.
Yeah.
You're talking about the unique ring structure of the Quran, and how that unique ring structure is particularly striking, considering the method in which revelation was given to the Prophet over 23 years on a circumstantial basis. All that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it was given over a long period of time, and it wasn't from beginning to end, you know, chronologically. It was this part, then this part, then this part, and it was just puzzle pieces that was put together.
And it was an oral tradition as well. It wasn't like
oral tradition at the beginning, and also, you know, like the first, they have the 9 different sections for the Quran, and you know, the first and the 9th, the 2nd and the 8th, and so on and so forth, all the way down to the 5th. all of them pretty much talk about the same thing. Or you know, and it was just amazing to see that ring structure. And then you go into each of the different sections, and it has its own ring structure within that section. And then you look and see the word middle in a ayah, in a verse that's literally in the middle of the Quran.
Yeah. I think just
I
for
mean,
the audience, that I was going to say, just for the audience,
go
who
ahead,
probably don't realize, but the verse 100, I think it's 143, 144 actually. It uses, or 143 actually, it uses the word wasatan, ummatan wasatan. So the justly balanced or justly middle nation, and that comes at the very middle of Surah Al-Baqarah, which is 286 verses. So 143 would be the one which is in the middle. And that if you look at the themes within the whole of that surah, that chapter, 286 verses, there is correspondence between the beginning of the verse towards the end of the verse, all the way to that particular middle, where it talks about, you know, the justly balanced or the middle nation, about the believers. And these are all throughout the whole of the Quran. There are various other linguistic features. And I think also what Khalil is also mentioning is that this is revealed over a 23-year period, where a prophet who's unlettered, illiterate, cannot read or write, he's reciting these verses in out of the original order that we have today, in a different order. And then when it comes together at the end, when the prophet says, right, this is the order, it fits this perfect structure. Yeah. And that's just like maybe one of the examples about the linguistic features of the Quran.
I posted the link to Many Prophet One Message YouTube channel on the ring composition.
It's a good video. Just before, because I want to give this to Yusuf, because he's gonna ask you a question, but then I want to just say something more basic than that, because I mean I've spoken to you about this several times, Justin, and you agree. So I just want to reiterate about the what is sufficient of a reason for someone to believe in Islam, as opposed to making a strong positive case for like the fact that, let's say, it is indubitable that Islam is of God. And we spoke about this several times, and we spoke about things like how, like the process of elimination, for example, how the rational conclusions you reach regarding the nature of God through natural theology should comport with this religion, that or with whatever religion you're going to consider to be of God, and should comport with our intuitions about this conception of God. Because again, remember that these intuitions that we have at a very basic level, what we do find is that once we put them under scrutiny, and we take this in some sort of rigorous philosophical exercise to determine whether we can say anything coherent about the nature of the necessary being, we find that it is perfectly in line with our intuition and our innate dispositions about this creator. So I guess this process of elimination, where Islam is one of the few religions that actually has a very clear-cut and straightforward conception of God that matches this rational foundation, and stuff like the preservation of scripture. Of course, all of these things can be argued. They come with a lot of baggage. But generally, the preservation of scripture, and how the Quran in 7th century Arabia, disconnected from the Judeo-Christian tradition, how it interacts with the previous scripture, and how it addresses the people of the book, and how it addresses the Jews and the Christians, and how it sort of brings that Abrahamic tradition back to Tawheed, back to the oneness of Allah after what happened with following the ascension of Christ. And also with Judaism, there's that very important point that we believe Jesus is one of the greatest messengers of God. Judaism kind of like skips over Jesus, and that's a very significant point for Islam, for making a cumulative case for Islam, the character of the Prophet, his teachings, the conditions, the circumstantial conditions in which the Quran was revealed. And again, it's just basically about what answers. I have these questions, right? Who's going to give me a reasonable answer? What worldview is going to provide me with a reasonable answer? I think that's what we regard as a sufficient reason for you to believe that this worldview or this position is reasonable. That having that sufficient reason doesn't mean that you're necessarily making the stronger claim that, okay, guys, come at me. you know, there's no take this down. I think these are two different stages. I think they're both very doable, but I think they're entirely different. So I think, Justin, you went through that first phase for a very long time, and we kind of linked these rational foundations to the core of Islam and to the teachings of Islam and the Quran and the Prophet. And whenever something came up, we had a lot of discussions against it. We had a lot of people we had ex-Muslims coming into the calls and arguing about Islam. Some of them were reasonable, and some of them had good arguments. But the thing is, with that back and forth, I think the general idea here is that you found that the answers to the questions you had were most reasonably found in this worldview called Islam. And I think that's sufficient for you to accept the position.
Correct. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. It was all about, from the very get-go, from day one of starting this channel and having these conversations, was how can I be the most reasonable and consistent within the views that I hold. I mean, it led straight to Islam at the end of the day. Right.
And I just want to hit on one point that we mentioned earlier. People need to understand that this stream is not about us going into all of the details of the arguments and explaining and breaking down each premise. This is about Justin's story, about his journey from what started out as Catholicism to atheism and now to Islam. The stream is not about going into depth with all of the arguments. It's more of an explanation of Justin's journey. But I did see a few comments in the chat of going from a necessary being to a creator. The question is, well, could this necessary being be something that's purely natural and naturalistic? We had a show on tap a couple streams ago on this issue where we went into what's called stage 2 cosmological arguments, where we went from just a basic cosmological argument to a stage 2, which is sort of an analysis of what the cause is or would be. And we explained how, under the arguments framework and sort of what the conclusion leads to, we argued that this necessary being must possess a will, and it must be a personal explanation rather than a purely naturalistic or scientific explanation in that sense. So if people want more details on that, they can go and look at the stream or talk to us about it in more detail another time, inshallah.
Yeah, I've just posted that in the chat as well. It's episode 6.
Yeah, and I just want to say for the there's been a lot of atheists that have tried to get a hold of me over private message to be like, hey, so I want to know, what you know. If you know the truth, I want to know. So what convinced you? I don't want to disrespect the argumentation by thinking that I can, in 2 paragraphs, sum up the arguments that we presented and discussed and argued for over 8 months in a 2-paragraph conclusion. And at the end of it, you'd be like, well, I'm not convinced. Well, I don't expect you to be convinced. Like this is literally 8 months of discussion that I would try and pack into 6 sentences. I'm not going to expect you to be convinced, but it'll give you a summary of what you believe or what I believe. And you're more than welcome to come and speak to me, or I'm sure that if you're, if you're respectable and whatnot, we have these groups every day. You can get a hold of me, and I talk to my brothers in these groups every day. And I'm sure that we'd be able to go through some of the arguments with you if you're truly open-minded. And I don't want to say that atheists are not open-minded. I just know that I was open-minded from the beginning. I claimed to be open-minded, and I think that's why it gave me the ability to actually do what's called an internal critique on other claims, not to hold this view that I always need to be disagreeing with this scripture or disagreeing with that. Like, literally open yourself up to doing an internal critique on somebody else's position and take what they believe into consideration in an argument, and then discuss it from an internal standpoint. I think
Right.
that's the best way of trying to, do these claims. But what happens most of the time is I got the right interpretation. No, I got the right interpretation. And they just talk past each other all day long instead of saying, what do you believe? Do we both value logic and reason and argumentation? Okay, let's do an internal critique on what you believe. Okay, I've shown that this cannot logically be possible. So what are you going to do now to resolve it?
Right.
And that's what I think you do with, the PhDs and scholars that you have on the Muslim Metaphysician channel. You do internal critiques on what they believe. You don't tell them that, well, the Trinity doesn't exist because, lem yulid wa lam yulid, and then call it a day,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So do you mind if do you mind if I ask? I don't know if you've already covered this. Sorry, I should get. One second. Can I ask, how did the atheist community react to this whole thing? I don't know if you've already mentioned this a little bit, but
we kind of did a little bit. We kind of did a little bit. So, a lot of the close friends of mine, they're still sticking around and saying that they are in support of me. Some of the close friends completely disassociated themselves from me. I've received death threats. But basically, at the end of the day, I've received a lot of flack from the atheist community for leaving. I've gotten many "How dare you" comments. How dare you? And in my mind, they're basically saying, how dare you be open-minded? Like, you were a public figure in our community and you've left now. And I think what that means is that you've made us look bad. And now we are all kind of questioning ourselves, because a lot of people have said, and I don't believe that I'm a super smart guy or anything like that. I believe that I've got common knowledge and I know how to walk a argument to its conclusion. And I mean, it's fairly common. People do it every day and they don't even know they're doing it. But they say, well, you're a lot smarter than I am, so I want to know, what you believed and what convinced you. You're a lot smarter than I am. So if that's the case, then be open-minded enough to at least have a conversation about the arguments before telling me, how dare you do this, and then start questioning your own beliefs after you've already made a negative comment. But I have received a lot of support from some other people like that I've seen in the chat. There's Oz, Pasta Mike, Reverend Brother Heathen. You guys met Jimmy yesterday. Those guys are awesome. Like, they're in support of what I'm doing. They still have the same views that I did when I started the show. Is, respect people, support their ability to believe what they want to believe, and start attacking it when they start legislating laws based on those beliefs. When they start, trying to affect the community and shove their religion or dogmas down people's throats, that's when you jump in and say, hey, this ain't cool. Like, that's what I did as an atheist, and I was totally cool with somebody believing in something different than I did, and I never wanted them to be hurt. I never wanted them to not flourish. And I think some of the atheist community, like, the tribalism really came out. I was seeing a lot of tribalism.
Yeah. See, Khalil, one of the things is, obviously as a theist, as a Muslim, we were sort of like, we saw this, this tribalism, and this almost religious, sort of way that atheists are. But whenever we sort of suggested that, atheism, not to yourself, I'm just saying generally with other atheists, they get really defensive. No. Atheism is just a lack of belief in gods. Yep. Yeah. And you had people doing videos against you saying you're damaging the political cause of atheism. Yeah. We are trying to, there's a fight. We need to normalize atheism, things like this. So it just came across it sort of brought more to the fore the fact that atheism is more than just not for all, but for a number of people, that atheism is more than just simply just saying I just lack belief. It became some sort of emotional attachment to a tribe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to add to that I too was like, I found that very interesting, because it's not that it isn't expected, but it's just that particularly amongst certain internet atheist groups, you would find this idea generally that, because we're atheists, we don't have that kind of tribalistic or that tribalistic mentality that comes with religion. And I mean, we acknowledge that religions, or any groups of people, any ideology that groups people together, is going to have this sort of effect amongst certain segments of these groups. And it's just that a lot of the internet atheists we interacted with seem to be in denial of this kind of thing, as if like atheism is the kind of solution to this tribalism. And I think it was very interesting what was happening, because it blew way out of proportion what occurred, and it was like a drama all the way for like, I think, over a week, and it was quite stressful.
I didn't make
and obviously
any.
we're not generalizing. I mean, and Justin already mentioned this. We're talking about specific people who did this. Some of them quite known in the atheist community as well. Some of them, some people have made videos about how Muslims convert people through Muslims attempt to radicalize people through Islamic philosophy. And that's very interesting, because at the beginning of the video, it's like, we're not generalizing, it's not all the Muslims, but in the context of what's happening and being in Justin's circle, obviously they're talking about the Muslims that use philosophical arguments to convince Justin. Very disingenuous, very dishonest, and it's not general. We're not generalizing. Again, there are atheists who supported Justin all the way. There are atheists who spoke out against this. A lot of atheists, actually. It's just the idea is that this mentality that you do find amongst certain religions is also found amongst within the atheist communities. I mean, every community has good and bad people. I think it's just about time that we all acknowledge that.
So, Khalil, how did you? Because obviously you had your empathetic atheists, you had atheists that were on that show. How did you feel when pretty much they all left the show? Because you didn't want to really change the nature of the show. You didn't want to call it empathetic atheist because you're not an atheist anymore. But you wanted to keep the same, genre and objective of the show. Get people on different values, different beliefs, interview them, get to understand what they're saying. How did it sort of make you feel when these guys sort of said, we can't work with you? Was it well,
it wasn't really that. They wanted to slowly, I think, distance themselves little by little, and it was kind of expected. I kind of saw it coming. I still am, talk to the guys, Bryce and Wes. I still talk to them. Wes actually made a post to where he was trying to get some of the atheist community to, in some sort of way try and do the fasting that we do during Ramadan. So it was kind of like a support thing, like, hey, let's support Justin in his transition, and let's try and fast with him. And if you can't do it, then you can't do it, but let's at least try and support him. So I appreciate that. I kind of saw that it was coming. They wanted to promote throughout all the hosts on the show. They wanted to promote secular humanism, and I think that was the one thing that we just couldn't get around, because as a Muslim, I can't promote a secular humanist agenda. I can promote a humanist agenda, though, and I thought that was me personally. I thought that was good enough, and if we have these other hosts on the show, they can promote secular humanism without us having to clash too much. Plus, the guests that we had on, these guests were not secular humanists, so we were platforming all kinds of people all the time with different beliefs. So I thought it could work. It apparently couldn't work. I don't want to try and force anybody to stay if they don't want to. So so now the show is getting reformatted, and I am in search of some more Muslim brothers or sisters that are philosophically sound. I'm gonna convince Hatem. I'm gonna buy him a house so he has his own room. But yeah, I'm looking for some people to kind of do the same thing that the Tap Show's doing over at the EA show. It's no longer the Empathetic Atheist. It's called Exploring Arguments. So I'm looking for some philosophically equipped Muslim brothers or sisters that are willing to do kind of the same thing as a transition to the channel, but still, I still have those good conversations with people.
Well, I want to welcome Hatem to the show. Assalamu alaikum. What's going on, bro?
Wa alaikum assalam. Hey, everybody, thanks for having me on. So my name's Hatem. I've been there since like the beginning. Just like talking with Khalil, just watching him just grow, and just thank you for having me on, guys.
MashaAllah. Yeah. So, Justin, we do want to kind of close out here, but before we do, we want to get to Shahada, which is public.
Jake, just really quickly, just wanted to make one tiny point. Yeah, just inshallah. Some people are saying in the comments, "Oh, such and such isn't evidence for the Quran or things like this." This show is not about proving Islam or proving belief in the Creator.
Yeah, I mean, I already said that.
Yeah. So just to make sure that people are aware that, there's lots of discussions that have been had with Justin, with other people about the importance of Islam and things like this, and the evidences and all these things. And like I think Khalil's mentioned, it's difficult to pack that into a couple of sentences. Yeah. Sorry, it's
just basically something that Justin finds striking and interesting. Nobody's saying, "Hey, guys, look at this. There's the word middle in the middle of the chapter, therefore Islam's true." And no one's making that argument, guys. So take it easy. It's just Justin basically explaining certain things that he found interesting.
I'm sorry. I was trying to be as clear and precise throughout this whole show.
No. You were clear and precise.
These convos, bro.
Not everybody is going to take it as they should. So I think that we just need to make that point.
Yeah, a lot of people are very impatient and they want you to just like spoon feed them the cure. Like one bite. That's all I want. That's all I need.
They want to skip and get right to the conclusion, like prove God now.
It's
not like that at all.
Yeah, I think we made Jake run away.
I don't know. We'll have to wait for Jake now. But just as a point as well is that, one of the evidences amongst many evidences that we look at in terms of the Quran is so I was just trying to look for Jake. One of the evidence is the fact that we believe that the Quran is a literary miracle. It's a linguistic construct that is inimitable, that's beyond human productive capacity. And it was one of the evidences and signs for the prophethood of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he would challenge that if they didn't, or the Quran challenges that if you don't believe it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then to produce just one chapter, one surah like it, and the shortest surah of the Quran is only 3 verses. And that's what we believe exists even today as a challenge. It's not like if somebody can replicate the Quran, replicate its style, its rhythm, and it's what we call balagha, its rhetoric, then that's the way of disproving Islam. And that was the way of disproving Islam at the time of the Prophet, when the Arabs at that time were the height of the Arabic language. Sorry, Jake's back, so I don't need to fill in more time.
No. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, and people, like you said, in the comments, they're going to say that if they're not really paying attention, that's fine. We can't really worry about them too much. But yeah, we have Justin here, of course, Khalil. Now, he did mention on Facebook, sort of changed his name on Facebook to Khalil, or presented a picture that sort of intimated that he was a Muslim, and people were asking questions about it, but he never really made like a big public thing. So we want to take this opportunity now for Justin to take what's called his Shahada, which is basically the statement of faith that people make when they become Muslims. And we have Brother Hatem here that's agreed to sort of walk Justin through it.
All right,
so,
let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, go for it. You ready, Justin?
Let's do it, brothers. Let's do it.
All right. Ashhadu an la ilaha
illallah
wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. All right. Now in English, I bear witness
I bear witness
that there is none worthy of worship
that there is none worthy of worship
except God,
except God,
and I bear witness
and I bear witness
that Muhammad is the messenger of God.
that Muhammad is the messenger of God.
All right. Welcome to Islam, brother.
Alhamdulillah.
Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
There was no takbir. Takbir!
Takbir!
Allah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Welcome, brother.
SubhanAllah, man.
Thank you.
That's good,
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. So,
Martin was trying to hold back the tears then, by the way. Were you
Martin's got a soft heart anyhow, brother. May Allah bless him.
soft-hearted, mashallah. Soft-hearted.
Yeah.
But it is it's an amazing thing because, as you know, isn't it, Khalil? But just like one thing, Khalil, we need to get this clarified. Why Khalil? Why Khalil Allah? Why did you change your name?
So it's not like, for example, you have Jake over here. He's been a Muslim for over a decade. He still goes by Jake. He doesn't have a Arabic name. It's not something that is required, which I've received a lot of comments. Well, why join a religion that makes you change your name? It doesn't at all. It was a change. It was a new leaf that I'm turning over, a new life that I'm starting. Like I'm getting into little different things that bring me closer to the culture. I just wanted something new, a change. So I started looking up different Arabic names, and I thought it was ironic, and I thought it was really meaningful when I found what Khalil meant, and it meant friend of, and I was like, okay, so I was an atheist YouTuber, and now I'm a Muslim, so I now consider myself a friend of God, and that's what Khalilullah means, is a friend of God. So that's kind of why I chose that.
MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah.
And Justin, yeah, before we end it, I just want you to explain, sort of what because we went into it a little bit, but Justin has a YouTube channel for those who aren't familiar. It's called the EA Show, and it used to stand for the Empathetic Atheist Show. But now he sort of rebranded it. He's kept it as the EA Show, but it has a new meaning. So do you want to just tell the audience what the new meaning of EA is?
Yeah, so the new meaning of EA is it's called exploring arguments. So like I said before, I'm looking for, philosophically equipped panelists, Muslim brothers or sisters that are comfortable in doing like a call-in show. Yes, this guy right here, talk him into people. Give him. So I'm looking for panelists to come on, and we do it's going to be informational videos, but also we'll be doing every Saturday at around noon or 2:00 Eastern time, so somewhere around there. Doing a call-in show to where it's kind of like the Thought Adventure podcast. So these guys every Sunday they do, or every other Sunday they do a call-in show on a specific topic. So that's how I'm looking to reformulate the channel itself. So I've reached out to a couple of people, but I'm still trying to figure out some people, some panelists that would be willing to and are equipped enough for the type of discussions that we want to have, because I definitely want to get way more academic than I was, when I first started the show, just having anybody on. We had people, that were laying back on their sofas with blankets over them, and other people that would come on and hit the bong as they were trying to talk. I'm trying to reframe it and reformulate the show to be much more professional and academic, and have people on to talk about what they believe and why.
Right.
Yes.
Before you say anything, I'm going to have to go because little Munchkin's, she's getting bored and she's hungry. So I'm going to say Assalamu alaikum. Say salam.
Wa alaikum salam.
Say loud, go salam.
Salam.
She said salam. All right, guys. But yeah,
All right.
Barakallahu
Alaikum
feek.
salam.
And yeah, take care. It's been a pleasure.
See you later, brother.
So yeah, you have something you
I
want
was
to
going to
add?
say really quickly. So obviously, anybody who converts to Islam, they're going to have their journey doesn't stop. It continues. And obviously, you're still in the process of further study, further engagement, looking at Islam in more details now. So obviously, and we all know that even as a Muslim, I was born a Muslim. I'm still studying Islam, learning various points in regards to it, how to live in regards to the ideals of Islam as well. So, it's for the audience out there. This is like the journey of Justin continues basically, but inshallah it continues with him being firm upon the Deen of Islam. Help him out with his EA show, and I think Jake maybe wants to make dua for him or.
Yeah, I mean, before I do that, I do want to reiterate, guys, go check out, I have running on the bottom of the screen, it's called the EA Show. Check out Justin's channel. I think he's also on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. You guys
I still need to change those things around. Those things sometimes will still say empathetic atheist, so I'm still working those out.
Yeah,
and
don't beat him up too much. He's still trying to change all his stuff on social media.
And some of them take like 3 to 5 days for them to check it to make sure somebody's not hacking your account to change the name. So it takes some time, so bear with me.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, go and check out his YouTube channel. Do subscribe to his channel. And anybody who wants to help out in any capacity, whether it be a mod on his channel or whatever, you guys can reach out to Justin personally. Yep. But, yeah, do you guys have anything else you want to add? Or that's it?
That's it, I think.
Okay. So, yeah, I just want to make a quick dua for Justin. I ask Allah that he will continue to guide Justin into the Deen of Islam, allow him to better understand the Deen. I want Allah to bless Justin and his family and make things easy for him, make him successful in this life and the next. Ameen. So, guys, with that being said, it was a pleasure. I want to thank, of course, Brother Khalil for joining us.
Thank you guys
having the courage to come on here and share his story, even with some of the backlash that he's gotten. People, if you can, reach out to him, make dua for him and his family, because it's much appreciated, especially in this month of Ramadan. And to all the viewers out there, like I said, I hope that you have a blessed month of Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak to everybody out there. Until next time, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
حي